So we have with us on this episode, Brigette Sancho. Now, but I'm going to call you affectionately Bridge. I know it's Brigette for everybody else, but I'm going to call you Bridge because I do, right?
Of course, because you can.
Bridget's worked in leadership and engagement programs, and particularly in Indigenous groups and inclusive sort of groups for many, many years. And these are all programs that impact community in a positive way. So I'm really excited. I mean, you're dabbling into spaces that really tie into this theme of philanthropy and social philanthropy and social, corporate social responsibility even.
Definitely.
Now, because you play heavily in that space, Bridge, so let's start with some context. Explain maybe why do you get involved in the things you do? What do you see as the value being added to communities through all these amazing programs that you've been involved with in the years I've known you?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think for me, it really started out with a question. I came from the US back in 2008. And when I first arrived, one of the things that I saw and that I thought was really interesting was, why aren't there Indigenous, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people like visibly in leadership? I'm talking about from public to private, nonprofit across the industries, and what's behind that. So I did a bit of digging, and I found out that there was, a significant, systemic issue that was really kind of very similar to, my experiences as an African-American woman. And I thought, well, I can't live here and not do anything, but what can I do that's going to make change, that's going to create the change that I want to see, for my life and for my environment and community, because I feel like it's all a big ecosystem. And I thought, well, what I'm sort of kind of good at is raising money. So that then, but I didn't start out raising money. I started out working at a nonprofit, Stepping Out, which
Yes, I remember. We'll talk about that later, actually.
Yeah, definitely. But then some personal things happened in my life, and I ended up working at UTS in the development kind of advancement area. And then, another turn of events happened, and they created a role for me to specifically raise funds for Indigenous education and research. And I thought, if I'm able to take my talent, which is raising money, to create a pipeline of more Indigenous people to come to higher education, to get a degree, then hopefully they'll go on to be those decision makers that I want to see.
Yeah, I love that. And, and I think we might have had this conversation. I'm passionate about that Indigenous community. I share, when I moved here, actually, I remember having such a strong vision. The day I landed on my flight, before I'd applied for my visa, I had a vision of the elders tethering me to this country, and I knew I was going to be an accepted visitor.
Yes.
And that's how I feel. I feel very accepted by the owners, really, of this land and country. I think it's beautiful, but it's fair to say in the last few years, there's been, visibility's been increasing in these areas, right? So the government closing the gap initiatives is a big one for sure. But what do you think are the drivers as to why these initiatives are now really more front of mind and more people's radars?
Well, I think, look, there's been a lot of policy, legislative changes, that are in the best interest of Indigenous people. And look, they are self-determined, and they've been raising their own flag for change. But I think now, especially in the university context, they're really listening, because specifically, UTS, claims to be, a university that puts social justice at the forefront. Well, you can't have social justice and really not do anything, creative and innovative, to really address the systemic issues, especially the closing the gap education issues. Yes. As it relates to Indigenous people. So as that's been more a mandate from policies, it's kind of trickling on down. And that's why I think institutions, specifically universities, are really kind of putting a lot of, not just words, but finance, support, and resources towards, initiatives that make change.